10 years ago today, we'd pretty much all been warned by our meteorologists that the perfect storm was coming.
This evening, you can see it swirling right over my shoulder here, what's being called a superstorm tonight. Hurricane Sandy is more than 200 miles off the coast and is about to crash into two other systems when it makes landfall.
The old saying, wind from the south has rain in its mouth. We also had a northeastern brewing. At the same time, high tides were supposed to be cresting. And to make matters worse, could it get any worse possibly? We had a full moon, which all of you know causes the gravitational pull.
Just have to mention that the cloud stretch from the Carolinas all the way to Hudson Bay and really spike north almost to the Arctic Circle. This is an impressive, incredible cloud canopy. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, we've ever seen in the Atlantic hurricane basis.
So you put all that together, and we're talking about Superstorm Sandy. Why wasn't it a hurricane, you ask? Good question. To be a Category 1 hurricane, you have to have 75-mile-an-hour winds per hour. It missed by 1 mile per hour. Perhaps if we all huffed and puffed and blew a little bit harder, it could have made it to a hurricane strength. Here today, we're joined by Dennis, the lovely guidance counselor, Miss Fallon, the backbone of the school, Nancy, the number cruncher, Sally, the iPad whiz, and at the time, little Paul. Each and every one of us are going to tell what it was like in their own personal experience. And as St. Benedict would say, we learn a lot from our youth. So we're going to start with Paul to give you a perspective of what it was like from a student angle, a senior at the time. Little Paul, how was it?
Hello, everyone. Well, class of 2013 alumni here. Honestly, I thought I was going to have to go to a different high school in my senior year at that point. You just see what was brewing on seeing what the meteorologists were predicting and just seeing the storm just getting stronger, and then you see it merge. Once the storm hit, I started seeing all the clips on the Weather Channel, and then power went out, and then I don't know how long power was out for all of you, but I was out for about 5-6 days and just listening on the radio. And then once power eventually came back on, seeing devastation, my heart sank. Just seeing everyone's belongings and homes utterly destroyed, and seeing the war marks in the cafeteria almost to the very top. And then the 400 on the whole lower levels of the library as well. Again, I just thought I wasn't going to have a senior year at St. Rose. We received we still had the text automated system at the time. So I believe we received text messages or a phone call on the cell phone saying school's going to remain closed until further notice. And then I remember we had a meeting, I think it was with you, Mr. Joyce, that at the time we met in the library and figured out what was what the game plan was. And then when we did come back, none of the students, myself included, had access to the 100s, 400s, little theater, including the basement of the Red Brick. So then what we had to do was have classes in these mobile, I don't want to say trailers, but like these mobile classrooms, the mobile classrooms. Besides it being incredibly cold in there at the time, it was just weird, honestly, just not having class in a traditional classroom, and had to walk outside, sometimes get locked out in the winter. That was interesting too. The one thing that definitely changed, though, there used to be a door that was sealed before we had the steps that we walk up from between the Red Brick and the 200 stairway. There used to be just a doorway that we would walk through, and we'll be right the down doors, right? So that was a big change, but it was just heartbreaking seeing everything transpire and just seeing devastation. But I'm just glad the Belmar area and St. Rose were able to recover.
So it was, once again, everything that could go wrong went wrong at the worst possible time. Whether you know it or not, we have an underground stream constantly under St. Rose. If you look at old postcards from the 20s and 30s, there was actually a channel going down 8th Avenue, going from the ocean to the inlet, the Shark River, which is neither a river nor has sharks in it. It's basically a tidal basin. But the water table is only about 9 feet deep. So that water table quickly got flooded and came up from down below. The second aspect that we got clobbered with was not so much the water, but initially the sand. Belmar had built these giant 12-foot dunes to combat the flow of Superstorm Sandy. The bulldozer worked night and day, but that turned out to be our worst enemy. The sand got pushed all the way down to St. Rose. So the day after Sandy hit, I came back to St. Rose, and they didn't allow cars, so I took my bicycle. They stopped me in Belmar, and I knew something was very wrong. All of the artwork from the bottom of the red brick was floating down Main Street. The poor art teacher, some of it was extremely AP art, and it was just floating down by Friedman's, where the new beer place is. And it was a shame because I knew my office was right next to the art room. I had all my Disney stuff in my office, and we'd lived through hurricanes before and northeasterns, so you kind of always knew to put all your precious stuff way up high. You knew you were going to get flooded a half a foot, maybe a foot or two, but not 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, but in this case, the entire right to the ceiling. So they had to pump. They had giant fire hoses, and they connected the town. There was no place to pump it to because the streets still had 2 or 3 feet of water. They had the pumps going all the way to the inlet. The other pumps went all the way to the Shark River. And then nicely, they let me into the red brick. By this time, it was only waist deep. I went to my office, but there was no office. The walls were gone. The art room walls were gone, and everything was just mud, sand, and water. I found a bag with all my Disney stuff, the names, the clipboards, the checks, dried them out, so all that was okay. But pretty much the fish were floating around. We had a couple turtles. There was some nice striped bass. But mostly through our alumni, through a lot of hard work and sweat and effort, we came back stronger. And just like when the gym burnt down, we ended up with a better gym. And just like with Superstorm Sandy, we came out with a building that is 5 times better than the original. So I kind of, as a Japanese said, anytime you have a disaster, they don't have a word for it. It's an opportunity, and that's kind of what we turned it into. We give it to Mr. Devaney, and he, of course, was worried about his gym leaking.
Superstorm Sandy. It was organized chaos, what I remember. They used our classroom, which is now called the MAC, as the cafeteria, and they put the big divider down.
Oh, that's right.
And half of the gym was the cafeteria, and the other half you were expected to hold gym class, except there were no locker rooms. So there was no dressing. We had 2 classes each period in there. So you're talking 40 to 44 students in half of a gym to get them physically educated. It didn't happen. So we just tried to keep them busy, played a little bit of volleyball or whatever. But what I remember is we were driving the people on the cafeteria crazy. Our kids would go over there, steal a French fry, run back. Their kids would run over, hit the volleyball 100 miles an hour, start laughing, and they would run back. So it was a challenge. And the second thing I remember, which was very interesting, I just remember this as a matter of fact, I got threatened to be arrested in the building. And it was about a week after it hit. And everyone's going stir crazy. So I drove my car to Neptune City and parked it in the pizzeria on 35. And I walked to Belmar the rest of the way. And I got to the school, no electricity, cold, and I snuck into the front doors. And I had a flashlight because we were told there's no electricity. And I made my way through the library into the weight room, which is over here. And I rode the stationary bike. I had to do something. And I'm riding the stationary bike with the flashlight on. And then all of a sudden I hear some voice yell, "Who are you?" And my first reaction was, "Who are you?" And he gave me the big John Wayne talk. "This is my building now. You're trespassing." So anyway, we talked about it a little bit, like 2 decent men. And he left. And when I got home that night, I got a phone call from the principal. Then there's two questions. Were you at school today? Yes, sister, I was. Were you in the weight room? Yes, sister, I was. And she laughed for about 20 minutes. And she said, I knew it had to be you. I knew it was you. You are not allowed in the building. You are trespassing. You will be arrested the next time you go in. So I didn't go in the next time. I just waited for a couple of more weeks until we opened up school legally. But the people came through. You know, I remember standing outside the, whatever it was, a Saturday or a Sunday. There had to be over 100 people ready to. A matter of fact, the powers that be said we have we can't use there's just too many people, sending people home. It was phenomenal. It was it was the epitome of teamwork, if I can say it like that. So I was very proud of the community. So we'll hand it off to Mrs. Fallon.
Sure. Okay. So I have two things that I was thinking about. I can remember I went to, my mother lived in Avon at the time, and I went to her house, which was destroyed. And so I thought when I was leaving her house, I was like, oh, if her house got wet, St. Rose must have gotten some water too, because the cafeteria always flooded. I was like, oh gosh, the cafeteria must have flooded. So I came here, I parked on Main Street in front of what is, you know, the corner lot, as we call it. And I was met halfway across the corner lot by Kevin Davis, who was the vice principal at the time. And he said to me, he goes, have you seen it? I was like, no, I haven't seen it. Oh, come take it. And I think this was like it was either the Tuesday, so the storm hit Sunday night. This was probably Tuesday or Wednesday. So he took me into the parking lot, and like that door that used to go into the 100s, and the water was at the door level. The same with the red brick basement, the door water at there. And it's like, oh, yeah, this isn't good. This is not going to be good. And then the other thing I remember is that in guidance, first of all, the main office came upstairs, and they were across the hall from us. The guidance suite, we were like the last people to get actual electricity. We had orange extension cords with those construction lights with the cages on them strung all across the guidance offices. Andrew was the maintenance guy at the time, and he had hooked us up finally with some semblance of electricity. And we didn't get our lights back on until January. Is when we got our power back. But fortunately, we had Ann Fisher Brown was one of the counselors at the time, and her husband owns Erner Barry, and so we would send counselors down to Erner Barry because they had power. So we would go down with our stuff, and we were able to then send out college applications and do everything and still work as best as we could while not being able to work from our offices itself because we didn't have the power to send anything. But that's what I remember. A few office people came upstairs.
Yeah, that was a wonderful 2 years being up there. I remember when we left the day before, they said, put everything up on your desks. So we spent the whole afternoon raising everything up, 4 feet?
I remember that too. That's what I think of.
Everybody had all their boxes and totes and whatever we had up high enough that it wouldn't get wet if, we did have water, because it was prone that we did get water in the main office all the time. Heavy rain.
Spring shower.
Yeah, and we had carpeting in there, so we were always drying out. So we moved everything up. I came back the next morning. I must have parked on Main Street because I was concerned about the convent. So I parked and I walked in the back, and the water went up to the convent, and I trudged through with my rain boots, and I was able to peek through that back 100's doorway, and literally, it looked like the water was up to 1 feet above the ceiling. And I just couldn't believe what I was looking at because now I'm thinking everything's underwater. Like here, not just our stuff that was on our desk, but everything. So then we moved eventually, when we could not be there any longer, they moved us up to the 200's conference room. But in that conference room held 5 departments in a small area, so it was very loud and it was chaotic. And it was not easy working conditions because it just was, like you said, organized chaos. We did the best we could and we got through it, and like Jerry said, we came out stronger and everything looks awesome. The 100's had a total remake, redo. Yeah,
All right, we can pass it over to Sally. She got stuck with all the bills.
That's true. The things that stick out to me most is the day we all came to talk about a game plan. And we all met in the pitch black, couldn't be any colder.
Yeah, freezing
Church.
cold for weeks.
It was so cold and so dark. And the gentleman who was going to be the company that was going to remodel us and
Restore.
restore. Exactly. Would not stop talking. And it was so freezing cold that day, and I remember vividly. Then when we did come back and the mobile classrooms were outside, we shared ours with, it was finance, and I guess Dottie Kelly was here then, like she did transportation, and so we split a trailer. And the thing that always sticks in my mind about the trailer were the metal ramps, because it was all winter long and they were always
Wet.
so icy, and you had no choice but to go in and out, because we had to go to the second floor to use any restroom or anything. And I remember holding on for dear life all the time. I remember when Lisa at the time was the finance director, our office was on the 100s too, lost everything, so many important papers. And we did the same thing. Lift up, raise up, took things out of drawers. There was no higher it could go, but if the water's to the ceiling, that doesn't matter.
But it did give us a chance to clear out clutter. You know, like things that we've been holding on to for so long.
And then when they finally did find our safe, it was full of like sand and everything, like drying and cleaning money and just things. Those are the things that stick in my head. And then I remember I was fortunate because as the time was passing and the renovation was finally, like, all the bad stuff was gone. Now we're going to be beautiful. We're going to redo. I was fortunate because we do pay the bills. I got to see what it was going to be like. The floor, the purple with the yellow, the logo, what they were going to do with the desks and the furniture. So it was, then I was like, wow, I can't wait to see when this is complete. It's going to really look great. And the building still, 10 years later, looks fantastic.
You know what I
floors,
remember?
everything looks beautiful.
Remember also is we put the word out there that we were in need of supplies. And do you remember? Everybody was sending us. Yeah, I just thought of it. Classroom supplies.
Ohio, remember?
Yeah, all over.
It was really uplifting. I remember sitting in the office with the Xerox nun, as we called her, and our job was to open up these mail. And the first one I opened up was some school from Ireland that sent us $10. Usually St. Rose is doing all this charity work. We're always doing outreach. But when I opened that up and I counted 10 $1 bills and the rest money from Ireland, I'm like, oh my God.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, do you remember we had binders and notebooks and
We had
pens
so many
and
office supplies.
yeah, so generous.
Doing that and donating supplies too.
Do you remember the parking lot full of everything in this building? That's like,
Yeah.
Everything had to be counted.
Everything that was
Every
purged
teacher,
out.
every pen, every microscope.
when they cleared out the building, like all the
Over by
desks
the
and
nun's
everything,
inventory.
Yeah.
all out in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That was like a heartbreaking sight.
We had nine dumpsters at once filled to the brim. I remember counting them and just all going away. All the desks, all the chairs.
Where were you then? Where was your home base?
Downstairs where the faculty room is now.
That's
That was the
Oh, that's a bad spot. That's a bad spot.
all the
That's
servants.
why you're far up now.
Yes.
yes. Way above waterline.
Way above. Lord,
Yes,
Lord,
when I came in, we had, you said, we put everything on top of the desk. My computer was on the floor. It was just loaded on the floor. And the whole office was a mess. We lost the servers.
Yeah.
So,
That was bad.
so what we had, the first thing we had to do was get new ones. So I remember that our department met with the administration in Federico's because they had light and they had heat. And that's where we had planned about what to do with the tech stuff and get new, new server and, it was a long time coming.
Wow.
It was
Remember we
wild.
went to Monmouth University for, like, we did our school trips and our retreat days.
And we
And
went
we-
to
we-
Wall Township Public.
Oh, you walked.
That's right.
The library
We never
up
skipped a
there
beat,
for our
yeah.
super meeting.
Yeah.
It was downstairs in a conference room.
It just,
Yeah.
every sense in your body was saturated. When you got here, you smelt the
Yeah.
diesel all day long.
The noise.
The noise
Noise, horrible.
It was so noisy.
It was like that humming.
Generators.
The generator.
Pick a sense, any sense you
all
have,
the
the sight of everything, the smell of the turpentine, the paint, the
The
diesel,
cord, all those
the gas.
big, thick, like cord things
Yeah.
going in and
Do you remember
out.
the air? They were the tunnels that went through to
Yes,
dry
I
out.
forgot about that.
It was
Oh my
loud.
gosh.
Do you know we had a faculty meeting right before it happened, and Sister Kathy in the little theater said, "If you don't hear from me, I'll see you on Monday." She never called us. I drove down on Sunday.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he said Sister Kathy never called. My husband said, "There's no way you have school." I said, "No, she never called. I have to drive." And I, like you, I drove down and there was like kayaks in the street. I said, "No, I have no school tomorrow." I think her phone was dead. There was no power anywhere. So
Yeah.
Now, I remember that my home in Wall Township, we had no power for 12 days.
Yeah.
How long was it out in Belmar?
I
Does
don't
anybody
know.
remember?
About 2 weeks. in certain
About the
parts.
same time?
It was the maddening thing is we didn't have power, but 2 blocks over did. You had people that had power envy.
We definitely had power envy.
People had power guilt. The people that had power felt guilty because their best friend, their neighbor, their brother or sister didn't have power. So either way, you had the jealous people, and then you had the people that felt guilty because they did have power. And most of all, we had a dozen or so students that lost their entire house.
That's right. That's right.
We had kids from Point Pleasant, Mount Logan, Bayhead, that
Yeah.
their houses were now splinters, and we were running around giving spare uniforms out. Who has a medium clothing, who has a 10.5 sneaker. So we supplied a lot of our students with clothes and material, food, and girls were living with their girlfriends and guys were staying over at other people's houses. It was a crazy thing. So we weren't too worried about anything, just getting everybody back here whenever they could.
Makes you realize how resilient we all are,
Yeah.
you know, that.
I remember the plywood,
Yeah.
just all the plywood blocking everything off.
Entranceways.
Like where we weren't allowed to go. I remember
You
hating
couldn't go
all
down
that
those
plywood.
stairs over there.
Was so sad.
But we did manage to go to Disney 3 weeks later.
Crazy.
And we took the Mary Joyce Express bus, and we were never so glad to say goodbye to this place. And we had a nice few days.
It was
down.
more.
Thank God for those seniors.
It's
Yeah,
good.
Good for those.
Yeah, no,
It was a good time to exit.
That's called the
stage
fourth
left.
year.
Freezing. It was freezing.
And the key was, we also wore those pins saying we survived.
We survived,
Oh.
exactly. We survived Sandy. And Disney was very nice to us. They gave us special treatment because we were a charity case.
Relating to your story, Dennis, we were up in the guidance office, the tech team was up in the guidance office making plans, and I had to go downstairs to pick up something, and I went outside, and that guy was by the door, and he wasn't going to let me in. And I said, "You can't go in, nobody can go in the building." So I said, "I have to go in, people are waiting for me." He said, "Do you mean there's other people?" So I said, "Yes." So finally, he followed me up, and he made everybody get out.
So you ratted me out.
do you remember that was the start of the bring your own device thing? Like no one could ever have their own device in here.
Right.
Suddenly, everyone was
Yes.
allowed to bring their own laptop in. So,
And that was the beginning of more kids going out to lunch.
yes, juniors and
And
seniors
it was
got
either
to lunch.
it was either you had to bring lunch
Yep.
or go out to lunch.
Right.
That's right.
But then a lot of some of the places were giving the kids like Sandy special for lunch. The kids got deals on lunches. Yeah, we didn't have the cafeteria anymore either.
Yeah. I mean, even look at our library here. Everything's so new and so nice.
Yeah.
You know,
And then the store, I remember when they said, what do you think? I said, where is my cash register? And thank God I used to clear it out, but there was still always something. And they were like, what do you think was in there? Like, and I trying to get an inventory of it, and it was hard, you know, it was heartbreaking. Like, there's a lot of stuff in there. Can't knock a good girl down.
Yeah. I think she comes back stronger every time she
Yes,
gets
come back stronger every time.
That true sense of community. I think when anybody ever comes here, the student said, I chose to come to St. Rose because I really felt like it was a family atmosphere, and there was this real sense of community. And I don't think there was a
100%.
Still feels that way.
demonstration of that
We're sure
community.
because we've seen that. It's
Yeah.
not just words. It's not
Yeah.
empty words.
Right.
We've seen it in
Right.
action.
We've lived it. We've lived it.
I think we live it, and I think we live it in so
live it
many
every
different
day.
ways.
Yeah.
Between how many alumni, Paul, I mean, that come back as teachers, send their kids here. I mean, it's just a family that it's 100 years. Hopefully, the next generation, my kids and their kids, are sitting talking about good things and what it means to them. I just don't see it any other way. It's just always, and even the new people and the parents, they always say the same thing. It feels like family, community, and we have nice kids. They always say your students are so nice.
And you get that wherever our kids, when you
Yes.
take them on field trips,
Yes.
you take them different places, and the things, they were really well behaved.
They're such
What a
good
nice
kids.
group of kids.
Yeah, it makes you proud.
Yes.
Yep.
If you had to finish the chapter, it would be reflection, which we've all done. It gives us direction. And as you so aptly put it, it's a community effort, and you can just walk around the school and see the fruits of our labor. And we thank you all for coming today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Joyce, 10 years.
We can't wait for the next natural disaster.
We'll be back.